Good morning, and welcome back to Grandma Payback Stories. They say church is where you go to find peace, but that's only true if no one decides you're expendable. I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was the silence. The piano didn't play that Sunday. No gentle notes drifting through the wooden pews. No familiar pause before the hymn. No soft mistakes that told me a human being was behind the keys. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something colder than grief. I felt injustice. I'm Evelyn Harper. I'm 72 years old, and people like to assume that means I don't notice things. They are wrong. If you believe stories where the weak stay weak, this isn't for you. But if you believe patience is power, stay with me. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand who I was before they made their mistake. And if you believe karma always finds a way, subscribe now. This story isn't finished. Every Sunday morning, I wake up before the sun. Not because I have to, because my body remembers discipline. I brew the same wheat coffee. I sit by the window for exactly 10 minutes. I watch the street wake up. I live alone now. My husband, Thomas, passed 7 winters ago. Cancer doesn't care how good a man you are. My children live in other states. They call. They love me, but they don't see me. So I go to church. Not for salvation. Not even for community. I go because routine keeps grief, from getting ideas. And because of the piano. His name was Michael. Mid-40s. Soft-spoken, always early. He smiled the way people do when they expect nothing back. Every Sunday, as I passed the piano, he'd nod. Good morning, Mrs. Harper. Not Evelyn. Not ma'am, Mrs. Harper. Respect matters when people think you don't need it anymore. I learned his patterns. He never skipped practice, never rushed hymns, never showed off. He played like music was service, not performance. And the church loved him, or so I thought. The church was old, wooden beams, stained glass pretending history was holiness. Small town churches run on 3 things: donations, appearances, control. The pastor smiled too much. The board spoke softly and decided loudly. I watched them for months. They didn't know that, because no one watches the old woman in the 3rd pew. That's the advantage. 3 Sundays before the silence, I noticed changes. Michael stopped chatting after service. His shoulders lowered. His hymns sped up, not from joy, but pressure. One Sunday, I heard whispers near the fellowship hall. Budget cuts, temporary. He should understand. People love saying he should understand when they mean he should suffer quietly. That morning, Michael still played, but his hands trembled, and for the first time, He didn't look at the congregation. He looked at the exit. I remember thinking, someone is about to do something cruel. And call it necessary, ... I was right. They thought I was just a visitor. Just another elderly woman warming a pew. They didn't know I was listening. They didn't know I was counting. And they certainly didn't know ... what I used to do for a living. But they were about to. If you're still with me, subscribe. Because what happened next is where patience turned into purpose. They didn't announce it from the pulpit. Of course they didn't. Church leaders never announce cruelty. They let it leak. I found out the way most inconvenient truths arrive. Through whispers ... dressed as prayer requests. I heard Michael's position ... was discontinued. Discontinued, like a broken appliance. Like a service no longer needed. I stood by the coffee table, holding a paper cup that burned my fingers, and I listened as people spoke around me like I wasn't there. He was so talented. ... one woman sighed. But the budget is tight. ... another replied, relieved. God understands. Someone added. God always understands. Apparently, more than the people doing the damage. I asked the only question that mattered. Did they tell him? The room went quiet. That was my answer. I waited near the piano. Old habits die hard. His hands still rested on the keys even when there was nothing left to play. Good morning, Michael, I said softly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They said it was temporary. ... he told me before I asked. Just until donations improve. I'd heard that lie before. Temporary suffering has a way of becoming ... permanent when no one pushes back. They offered you severance. I asked. He laughed. Once. No. They said I should be grateful for the opportunity I had. Grateful. That word has been used to keep good people quiet for centuries. I nodded. I thanked him for the music. I wished him well, and then I went home and wrote his name down in a notebook I hadn't opened in years. The following Sunday, the piano was replaced with a keyboard. Cheaper, portable, soulless. A young volunteer fumbled through hymns like there were chores. The pastor smiled wider than ever. Isn't it wonderful, he said, how God provides solutions? I watched the front row nod obediently. No one asked why the solution sounded worse. No one asked why Michael wasn't there. That's when I noticed something else. The donation plates were heavier. Funny how budgets tighten only around people, never around power. Michael stopped coming to church, but the church didn't stop talking about him. He was too sensitive. He didn't fit the new vision. He lacked flexibility. They rewrote his character the way institutions always do, carefully enough to sound reasonable. I heard one board member say, at his age, change is hard. I almost laughed. They didn't know who they were talking to. and they certainly didn't know who was listening. The church board met on Wednesdays. I knew that because their cars always filled the parking lot late into the evening. One night, I stayed longer than usual. That's when I learned what really happens behind closed doors. Stay with me and subscribe for part 2.